Everyone laughed when a millionaire adopted a poor girl from the streets, then saw her exam. Before starting to watch this story, tell us in the comments section from which city you're watching this story. Let's enjoy this story. It was a chilly evening in downtown Seattle, the kind that makes people pull their coats tighter and quicken their pace. The sidewalks were bustling with office workers heading home, students chatting loudly, and street vendors calling out their last sales of the day. Amid the noise and movement, no one noticed the small figure sitting on the corner of Pine Street and 3rd Avenue. She sat there every evening, tucked against the stone wall of an old cafe, her oversized hoodie pulled over her messy blonde hair, her hands cupped around a paper cup with a few coins clinking at the bottom. Her name was Lucy, and at just 14 she had already spent 3 years surviving on the streets. Lucy had once lived in a small suburban house with a garden in Tacoma. Back then, her mother would braid her hair every morning before school, and her father would whistle while making pancakes. But everything changed one fateful night when a car accident claimed both their lives. With no relatives willing to take her in, Lucy found herself in the foster system. It didn't take long for her to realize that some homes were worse than being on the streets. She ran away at 11, convinced that freedom, even if it meant living on cold sidewalks, was better than being trapped in a place that didn't feel like home. That evening, as Lucy counted the few coins she had managed to collect, her stomach grumbled. The smell of freshly baked pretzels from a nearby cart made her throat tighten. She considered using the last of her money for a hot pretzel, but what if she didn't make any more tonight? As she pondered her decision, a shiny black SUV pulled up right in front of her, blocking her view of the crosswalk. Annoyed, Lucy looked up and froze. A tall man in his early 50s stepped out, wearing a tailored navy blue suit and polished shoes that probably cost more than she had ever seen in one place. He looked lost, his eyes scanning the area as if searching for something. Before Lucy could decide whether to make a quick escape, the man's eyes landed on her. Instead of the usual pity or disdain, there was something different. Curiosity, maybe? He hesitated for a moment, then approached her. "Hey," he said softly, crouching down to meet her eye level. "You okay?" Lucy didn't answer. Experience had taught her that talking to strangers rarely ended well. But the man didn't seem deterred. "I'm just looking for the nearest shelter," he explained. "My name's Thomas. I'm not from around here." His voice was calm and reassuring. Still wary, Lucy pointed down the street. "2 blocks that way. The one with the red door." Thomas nodded. "Thanks. You live around here?" Lucy's eyes narrowed. "Why do you care?" He smiled faintly. "I guess I'm just curious. You seem young to be out here alone." Lucy shrugged. "I get by." Thomas glanced at the cup of coins and then back at her face. "How long have you been on your own?" Her instinct was to lie, to make up some story that would make him leave. But something in his gaze was different from the others who occasionally threw $1 her way. "A while," she muttered. He looked thoughtful, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a $20 bill, folding it neatly before dropping it into her cup. Lucy's eyes widened, but before she could say thank you, he spoke again. "Are you hungry?" The question was so unexpected that she didn't know how to respond. When she didn't answer, Thomas motioned toward the cafe behind her. "How about I buy you something warm to eat? Just a meal. No strings attached." Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and despite her instincts to refuse, Lucy found herself nodding. Inside the cafe, the warmth was overwhelming, and Lucy couldn't help but shiver as her body adjusted. Thomas ordered 2 bowls of soup and sandwiches. As they sat down, he didn't press her with questions. Instead, he talked about his own life, sharing bits about his work as a tech entrepreneur from New York, how he was visiting Seattle for a conference. His easy manner made Lucy lower her guard just a bit. Finally, after the food had arrived and the initial tension had eased, Thomas leaned back and asked, "If you could change one thing about your life right now, what would it be?" Lucy stared at her soup, swirling the spoon absently. "A safe place to sleep. And not worrying about, well, everything." Thomas nodded slowly, seeming to weigh his thoughts. "What if I told you that you could have that? A safe place, a chance to go back to school and not worry about your next meal?" Suspicion flickered in her eyes. "You're joking." "No," he said seriously. "I know it sounds strange, but I grew up poor too. My parents didn't have much and I was lucky to get an education. I just think, everyone deserves a chance." Lucy eyed him warily. "Why me?" Thomas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because when I looked at you, I saw myself. And because everyone deserves someone who believes in them." The cafe was bustling around them, but Lucy barely noticed. For the first time in a long time, she felt something unfamiliar: hope. But doubt crept in just as quickly. People had made promises before and they never lasted. She wanted to believe him, but what if this was just another lie? Sensing her hesitation, Thomas leaned forward. I'm not saying you have to trust me right now. But let me help you. Just for tonight, a warm bed and a safe place to sleep. We'll figure the rest out later. Lucy wanted to say yes, but fear kept her rooted to her seat. Finally, with a shaky breath, she whispered, okay. Just tonight. As they left the cafe, Thomas made a quick call to his assistant, arranging for a room at a nearby hotel. Lucy kept her guard up, ready to bolt if anything seemed off. But as they walked through the busy streets, she couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, this was the break she had been praying for. That night, as Lucy lay in the hotel bed, wrapped in clean sheets and the scent of lavender, she couldn't stop her mind from racing. What if he was serious? What if this was her chance to leave the streets behind? Sleep came slowly, but for the first time in years it was peaceful. Little did Lucy know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would change not only her life but also challenge the perceptions of everyone who had ever doubted her worth. The morning sunlight streamed through the hotel window, warming Lucy's face. She squinted against the brightness, momentarily forgetting where she was. For a split second, fear gripped her, and she sat up abruptly, eyes darting around the unfamiliar room. Then, memories from the previous night came flooding back. The cafe, the warm food, and Thomas, the man who had promised her safety. Her heart rate slowed, and she allowed herself to relax into the plush bed, savoring the softness against her back. It had been so long since she had slept on anything but cold pavement or a worn-out sleeping bag that this comfort felt almost unreal. A knock at the door startled her. Lucy froze, unsure of what to do. Thomas's voice called gently from the other side. Lucy? I brought breakfast. Reluctantly, she pulled herself out of bed, padding cautiously to the door. She unlocked it slowly, peeking through the small gap. Thomas stood there with a tray balanced in one hand, pancakes, orange juice, and a small bowl of fruit. He smiled warmly when he saw her cautious expression. Good morning. I thought you might be hungry, he said, carefully setting the tray on the small table near the window. Lucy moved closer, curiosity overriding her caution. The smell of the pancakes made her stomach growl, and Thomas pretended not to notice her embarrassment. He poured the juice into a glass and slid it toward her. Lucy sat down slowly, still not fully convinced this was real. Why are you doing this? She asked, not meeting his gaze. Thomas didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a chair and sat across from her, his face thoughtful. When I was a kid, he began, my parents worked in a factory in Queens. We didn't have much. Sometimes they couldn't even afford dinner. One winter, I remember begging outside a deli just to get something warm to eat. A man, a complete stranger, handed me a hot sandwich without saying a word. It felt like the best meal of my life. Later, when I became successful, I promised myself that if I ever saw someone in need, I wouldn't just walk by. I couldn't. Lucy didn't know what to say. She focused on the pancakes, cutting into them hesitantly. The first bite was so delicious that she couldn't help but close her eyes, savoring the sweetness. Thomas watched her with a soft smile, not pushing her to talk. After a few minutes, Lucy spoke up, her voice quieter than before. People don't usually help. They just look at me like I'm a problem. Thomas nodded, his face growing serious. People are quick to judge what they don't understand. It's easier to look away than to reach out. I used to think the world was only about making money and building my business. But after losing my wife a few years ago, I realized that success means nothing if you're not making a difference. Lucy hesitated, unsure if she should ask, but curiosity got the better of her. What happened to your wife? She was sick. Cancer. It happened fast. One moment we were planning a vacation, and the next I was sitting in a hospital room holding her hand, wishing I could do something to change it. Thomas's voice grew softer, and Lucy could see the pain still lingering in his eyes. She used to volunteer at shelters and soup kitchens. Always said that helping someone else was the best way to heal your own heart. Lucy bit her lip, unsure of how to respond. Sympathy didn't come easily when you were used to being hardened by life. I'm sorry, she murmured. Thomas gave a small nod, pulling himself back from the memories. I guess that's why I stopped when I saw you yesterday. You reminded me of the kids my wife used to help. And you have that same spark in your eyes that she loved seeing in people. Lucy didn't know how to process this. No one had ever spoken about her like that before. She had always been the unwanted, the nuisance, the girl who couldn't stay in one place for too long. Part of her wanted to believe Thomas, but the other part, the one used to betrayal and disappointment, warned her to keep her distance. After breakfast, Thomas suggested they take a walk. Lucy reluctantly agreed, keeping a few steps behind him as they left the hotel. The city was busy as usual, but walking beside Thomas made her feel oddly safer. They wandered through Pike Place Market, where vendors called out about fresh seafood and handmade crafts. Lucy couldn't help but glance at the flowers on display, vibrant tulips and sunflowers that looked impossibly bright against the dull gray of the city. Thomas stopped at a small stand selling handmade bracelets. He picked up a simple one with blue and white beads and handed it to Lucy. "A little reminder," he said, "that you don't always have to face everything alone." Lucy took the bracelet, running her fingers over the cool beads. "Thank you," she whispered. They kept walking and eventually Thomas started talking about his plans. "I was thinking, maybe I could help you get back into school. I know it's been a while but you're smart, Lucy. You deserve a chance." Lucy's throat tightened. School seemed like a distant memory, something that belonged to another version of herself. The one who had parents and a bed and a sense of security. "What's the point?" she mumbled. "People like me don't just go to school and have normal lives." Thomas stopped walking, turning to face her. "People like you? Lucy, you're just a kid who's had a rough start. That doesn't mean you don't deserve a better future. I'm not saying it'll be easy. I know you've had to fight for everything. But I'm willing to help if you'll let me." Lucy's eyes stung and she quickly looked away. Hope was dangerous. It had let her down too many times before. But something about Thomas's unwavering kindness made her want to believe, just this once, that maybe things could be different. They walked back to the hotel in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Thomas didn't push her for an answer, just let her process everything at her own pace. When they returned to the room, Lucy went straight to the window, looking down at the bustling street below. People moved like tiny dots, rushing around without noticing the girl watching from above. For the first time, Lucy felt like she wasn't just another forgotten face in the crowd. Thomas spoke from behind her, his voice calm and reassuring. "You don't have to decide today. Just think about it. No matter what, I'm not going to abandon you." Lucy didn't reply, but for the first time in years her heart felt just a little lighter. Maybe it was because someone had seen her, really seen her, and had chosen to stay. That night, as Lucy curled up on the hotel bed, she slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, tracing the pattern of the beads with her thumb. She couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, things were finally changing. And as she drifted off to sleep, a small part of her dared to believe that a better life was possible. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. The next morning, Lucy woke up to the sound of raindrops tapping against the hotel window. She stretched out on the soft mattress, the feeling of warmth and comfort still foreign to her. For a moment she thought it had all been a dream, a safe bed, a hot meal, and someone who seemed to care. But as she glanced around the room, reality sank in. The neat pile of clothes on the armchair, the untouched fruit on the table, it was all real. Thomas had stepped out early, leaving a note on the nightstand saying he'd be back soon with some essentials. Lucy read the note twice, the neat handwriting reminding her of her father's. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket, afraid that if she didn't hold on to it, everything would slip away. The sky outside was gray and heavy, the kind of Seattle weather Lucy was used to. She stood at the window watching people scurry by with umbrellas, their faces pinched against the cold. Down below, she could see the spot where she used to sit, hoping for loose change from hurried strangers. She wondered if any of the regulars had noticed her absence, or if she had already faded from memory like a forgotten raindrop in a storm. The thought made her chest ache, but she pushed it away. When Thomas returned, he was carrying a couple of shopping bags, his coat damp from the rain. He greeted Lucy with a warm smile, shaking the water from his umbrella. "I got you some clothes and a few things you might need. Hope the sizes are right," he said, placing the bags on the bed. Lucy hesitated before peering inside, finding jeans, a few shirts, socks, and even a soft gray hoodie. There was also a pair of sneakers, practical and sturdy. She glanced up at Thomas, unsure how to express her gratitude. "Thank you," she mumbled, trying not to let the emotion show on her face. "No need to thank me," Thomas replied easily. "You deserve decent clothes. Besides, I figured we might go out today and get you enrolled in a school. If you're still up for it." Lucy's fingers tightened around the hoodie. "You really think they'll let someone like me in?" Thomas sat down on the armchair, his face thoughtful. "It might take some convincing, but there's a school not far from here that has a flexible enrollment policy. They focus on helping kids who've been through rough situations. I thought it might be a good place to start." Lucy didn't know what to say. School seemed like another world, one she wasn't sure she could fit into anymore. She'd spent so long on the streets that the idea of sitting at a desk, surrounded by other kids, felt almost impossible. What if they looked at her like she didn't belong? What if they whispered behind her back? Sensing her hesitation, Thomas spoke softly. I know it's a big change, but you're smarter than you think. You deserve a chance to learn and be a kid again. No one's going to judge you for your past, not if I can help it. Lucy looked down at the sneakers, brushing her thumb over the clean white laces. A part of her wanted to believe him, to trust that this wasn't just another temporary kindness that would disappear as soon as reality hit. Finally she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay, I'll try. A couple of hours later they walked into the reception area of Fairmont Community School, a modest brick building with a mural of smiling students painted on one wall. Thomas spoke to the receptionist, explaining Lucy's situation without revealing too much. The woman nodded sympathetically, directing them to the principal's office. The principal, Mrs. Wallace, was a tall woman with curly hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She greeted them with a firm handshake and gestured for them to sit. Thomas explained that Lucy hadn't been in school for several years but was eager to learn. Mrs. Wallace looked at Lucy, her eyes sharp but not unkind. We do have a program for kids who need extra support, she said. It won't be easy. You'll have to catch up on a lot of material. But we believe in giving everyone a chance. Lucy swallowed hard. I'll work hard. I promise. Mrs. Wallace smiled faintly, nodding. Good. We'll start with an assessment to see where you're at. From there we'll create a plan to help you catch up. School isn't just about grades, it's about rebuilding confidence too. After a brief tour they left the school, and Lucy felt a knot of anxiety settle in her stomach. Thomas noticed her silence and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You did great in there. One step at a time, okay? They stopped for lunch at a small diner, and Lucy found herself picking at her food, her mind racing. What if I mess up? What if they think I'm too dumb to be there? Thomas set his fork down, looking at her intently. Lucy, listen to me. You are not dumb. You've survived things most people can't imagine. That takes brains and strength. School might feel strange at first, but you'll get the hang of it. And I'll be right here to help you through it. His words settled something inside her, but doubt still lingered. She knew how people looked at her when they saw her on the street, like she was invisible or worse, a problem to be ignored. How would kids at school see her? Would they whisper about her clothes or the way she talked? The thought made her stomach twist. That night, back at the hotel, Lucy tried on the new clothes, looking at herself in the mirror. The jeans fit well and the hoodie was warm. She pulled the hood over her head, imagining what it would feel like to walk into school like a normal kid. Would anyone even notice her? Maybe it was better that way. Thomas knocked softly on the door, stepping inside when she nodded. How are you holding up? Lucy shrugged. Just thinking. He gave her a small smile. Change is scary. I get it. But you don't have to do this alone. I'll be here every step of the way. And once you settle in, you might actually start liking it. Lucy didn't know if she believed that. Liking school seemed like a distant dream. But something about the way Thomas spoke made her want to try. She looked at him, her blue eyes serious. You promise you won't leave? Thomas's expression softened. I promise. No matter how hard it gets, I'm not going anywhere. Lucy wanted to believe him. And as she lay down to sleep that night, she found herself daring to imagine a life where she wasn't just surviving but actually living. Going to school, making friends, and maybe even having a future that didn't involve fighting for scraps on the street. For the first time in a long while, hope didn't seem so impossible. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. The morning of Lucy's first day at school arrived quicker than she had expected. She barely slept the night before, her mind spinning with worries about what the other kids would think of her. What if they could tell just by looking at her that she had lived on the streets? What if they made fun of her clothes even though they were new? Thomas had assured her that everything would be fine, but reassurance didn't come easily when fear had been a constant companion for years. Thomas had arranged for Lucy to start midweek, hoping it would be less overwhelming than joining on a hectic Monday. They shared a quiet breakfast at the hotel. Lucy picked at her toast, barely eating, her stomach knotted with anxiety. Thomas noticed her unease and offered a gentle smile. You know, it's okay to be nervous. Everyone's nervous on their first day at a new school. Even kids who've never had to worry about anything. Lucy didn't respond, just glanced at her shoes. Thomas slid a small notebook across the table toward her. I got you this. Sometimes it helps to write things down when they feel too big to say out loud. Lucy ran her fingers over the cover, unsure whether to feel grateful or overwhelmed. It was strange having someone think about what she might need. They took the bus to Fairmont Community School. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast, casting a dull light over the city. As they approached the building, Lucy felt her heart pounding in her chest. She gripped the straps of her backpack, her mind racing with thoughts of running away. But when she looked up at Thomas, standing tall and calm beside her, she forced herself to breathe. Inside, the hallways buzzed with energy, students rushing to their lockers, teachers chatting as they prepared for the next class. Lucy felt small and out of place, like a stray cat wandering into a room full of well-groomed pets. Mrs. Wallace, the principal, greeted them at the entrance. She smiled warmly at Lucy. "You ready for your big day?" Lucy hesitated, then gave a small nod. Mrs. Wallace led them to the classroom where Lucy would spend most of her time. The walls were decorated with colorful posters, and the hum of chatter filled the air. The teacher, Ms. Daniels, welcomed Lucy with a kind smile. "Class, we have a new student joining us today. This is Lucy. Let's make her feel welcome." Lucy kept her eyes down, hoping to blend into the background. Ms. Daniels directed her to an empty seat near the window. As she slid into the chair, Lucy felt dozens of eyes on her, curious and judgmental. A girl next to her whispered something to her friend, and Lucy's cheeks burned, wondering if they were already talking about her. Ms. Daniels began the lesson on American history, discussing the westward expansion. Lucy tried to focus, but the unfamiliar terms swirled in her head. She had missed so much school that even the simplest discussions felt daunting. She doodled in her notebook to calm her nerves, tracing patterns without realizing she was biting her lips so hard it hurt. At lunchtime, Lucy tried to slip away to a quiet spot outside, but before she could leave the classroom, a boy with dark curly hair blocked her path. "Hey, new girl," he said with a smirk. "Where'd you come from?" "Mars." His friend snickered, and Lucy felt her pulse quicken. She didn't know how to respond. Before she could find words, another voice cut in. "Leave her alone, Mason," said a girl with short brown hair and glasses. She shot him a glare that made him shrug and saunter away. The girl turned to Lucy, her face softening. "Don't mind him. He thinks he's funny. I'm Emily. You want to sit with us at lunch?" Lucy hesitated. Emily's smile seemed genuine, but trust didn't come easy. Finally she nodded. Emily led her to a table near the window, where two other kids were already eating. "This is Max and Olivia," Emily introduced. They nodded politely, giving Lucy space to settle in. To Lucy's surprise, they didn't bombard her with questions. Instead, they talked about the upcoming science fair, debating whether building a model volcano was too cliché. Lucy stayed quiet, listening more than participating, but she couldn't help feeling a tiny flicker of comfort. Maybe not everyone here was looking to judge her. After lunch, they headed to math class where Lucy struggled to keep up. Numbers and equations danced on the board and her mind fogged over. Ms. Daniels noticed her confusion and knelt by her desk during a practice problem. "It's okay if it's tough," she whispered gently. "We'll work on it together." Lucy nodded, feeling embarrassed but grateful for the kindness. The final bell rang sooner than expected, and Lucy felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. Thomas was waiting for her at the school gate, his expression curious and hopeful. "How was it?" he asked as they walked toward the bus stop. Lucy shrugged, unsure how to explain the tangled mess of her day. "It wasn't as bad as I thought. Some kids were nice." Thomas smiled. "That's a good start." They rode the bus in comfortable silence. Back at the hotel, Thomas encouraged her to talk more about her classes, but Lucy found it hard to open up. She couldn't shake the feeling that this new life was temporary, that any moment it could be ripped away like every good thing before. Thomas seemed to sense her worry and didn't push. Instead, he told her stories from his own awkward teenage years, how he once spilled soda on his math teacher's shoes or forgot his lines in a school play. Lucy found herself smiling despite the tension in her chest. As the evening wore on, Thomas sat down with her to review the math problems from class. He explained things patiently, never making her feel stupid for not understanding. For the first time, learning didn't feel like a battle. When they finished, Lucy quietly thanked him, the words tasting unfamiliar yet comforting. Before bed, Lucy took out the notebook Thomas had given her. She flipped through the blank pages, unsure what to write. Finally, she scribbled a few words in messy handwriting. "Today wasn't terrible. Some kids were okay. I didn't run away. Maybe tomorrow will be okay too." She stared at the words for a long time, not sure how to feel about the cautious hope creeping in. Was it foolish to think that maybe, just maybe, this new life could be different? As she closed the notebook and curled up under the covers, Lucy couldn't help but wonder if happiness was something she could learn to believe in. The sounds of the city faded into the night, and for the first time in a long while, Lucy slept without fear of what tomorrow might bring. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Over the next few weeks, Lucy slowly began to find her footing at Fairmont Community School. Mornings were still tough, waking up on time, choosing clothes that didn't make her stand out too much, and forcing herself to eat breakfast even when her stomach was tight with anxiety. Thomas had set up a routine to help her adjust, making sure she had everything ready the night before. He even taught her how to set the hotel room alarm so she wouldn't oversleep. Sometimes, when she felt overwhelmed, Lucy would catch herself wondering why Thomas bothered. She had tried to ask him once, but he just smiled in that calm, unwavering way of his and said, "Because you deserve a chance." She wanted to believe that, but doubt still lingered like a shadow. At school, Lucy's days were a mix of small victories and quiet struggles. Ms. Daniels remained patient, especially with math, and Emily continued to invite her to sit at their lunch table. Lucy couldn't help but notice how Emily always seemed to know when she was feeling out of place, smoothly steering the conversation toward topics Lucy could join in on, like books or movies. Max was quieter, but Olivia's chatter made up for it. Olivia seemed fascinated by Lucy's stories, even the small ones, like how she'd once watched the Seattle fireworks from the roof of an abandoned building. Lucy never talked about her parents or the streets, but she sometimes slipped up, mentioning things that made Emily give her a sympathetic glance. Still, no one pried, and for that Lucy was grateful. One Friday afternoon, Ms. Daniels announced a group project on famous historical figures. Each group would create a presentation about someone who had made a significant impact. Lucy's heart sank when Ms. Daniels called out her name alongside Mason, the boy who had teased her on the first day. She saw his face twist in annoyance, and the knot in her stomach tightened. They were joined by another girl, Becca, who seemed indifferent to both of them. After class, Mason barely looked at Lucy as he muttered, "Let's just pick someone easy and get it over with." Becca shrugged. "What about Harriet Tubman? There's tons of stuff about her." Mason agreed immediately, clearly not interested in putting much thought into it. Lucy hesitated. "We could do that," she said quietly, not wanting to cause any conflict. Becca glanced at her, sensing her discomfort. "You good with that?" Lucy nodded, even though she didn't feel good about anything involving Mason. They agreed to meet in the library after school to divide up the work. When they gathered around one of the library tables, Mason immediately pulled out his phone, scrolling through his social media. Becca opened her notebook and looked at Lucy. "Maybe you can find some basic facts and I'll look for quotes. Mason can put together the slides." Mason scoffed. "Yeah, whatever." Lucy bit her lip, determined not to let his attitude ruin things. She found a few books about Harriet Tubman and began taking notes, her hand moving cautiously across the paper. Becca occasionally asked her opinion, but Mason stayed detached, barely contributing. Lucy forced herself to keep working, reminding herself that not everyone would be like Emily and Olivia. The weekend passed slowly, with Lucy spending most of it at the hotel, reviewing the notes she'd taken. Thomas noticed her quietness and asked if she wanted to go for a walk. They strolled through Pike Place Market, the bustling atmosphere somewhat comforting. Lucy finally opened up about the project, her voice small and uncertain. "This boy in my group, he doesn't like me. I don't know why." Thomas stopped walking, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes people push others away because they're dealing with their own problems. Or maybe they just don't understand what makes someone different from them. It's not about you, Lucy. It's about him." Lucy wanted to believe that, but it didn't make facing Mason any easier. On Monday, when they met again to finalize the project, Mason made a snide comment about how slow Lucy was at finding information. Becca shot him a glare, but Lucy just stared at her notebook, the familiar shame creeping in. Thomas's words echoed in her mind, and she took a deep breath. "I did find something good," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Harriet Tubman once said, 'Every great dream begins with a dreamer.' Maybe we can use that at the start." Becca nodded appreciatively. Mason just shrugged, but Lucy felt a small surge of pride for speaking up. The day of the presentation arrived, and Lucy's nerves were in overdrive. Standing in front of the class was terrifying, and Mason's indifferent attitude didn't help. When it was their turn, Becca started with the introduction, and Mason barely glanced at the slides as he read from his notes. When it was Lucy's turn, she felt her hands shaking, but she forced herself to speak clearly. Harriet Tubman didn't just dream of freedom for herself. She fought for it, and then she went back to help others find it too. She didn't give up, even when it seemed impossible. She looked at the class, trying to focus on Emily's encouraging smile instead of Mason's glare. It wasn't just about escaping. It was about giving others hope. When they finished, Ms. Daniels praised their teamwork and the way Lucy had expressed the significance of Tubman's efforts. Mason rolled his eyes, but Becca gave Lucy a small, supportive nod. Later, as they walked out of class, Emily caught up with Lucy. "You did great. You didn't look nervous at all." Lucy smiled faintly, still unsure how to take compliments. Back at the hotel that evening, Thomas asked how it went, and Lucy recounted the presentation. "I think it was okay," she said, fiddling with the bracelet Thomas had given her. Thomas grinned. "Okay sounds like a win to me. You should be proud of yourself." Lucy felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a feeling she wasn't used to. Maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to belong somewhere. That night, as Lucy scribbled in her notebook, she wrote about the project and how it felt to speak in front of everyone. She wrote about Mason's attitude and how she had pushed through despite feeling small. It wasn't a perfect day, but it was another step toward something better. For once, she didn't feel like running away. She was starting to see that bravery wasn't about not being scared, it was about showing up despite the fear. Lucy couldn't help but wonder if Harriet Tubman had felt that way too. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Life at Fairmont Community School was gradually becoming more manageable for Lucy. The fear that had once clenched her heart each morning was beginning to loosen its grip. She still had moments when she felt out of place, but they didn't overwhelm her as they used to. Emily, Olivia, and Max remained a constant presence, always making sure she wasn't left alone during lunch or class projects. Mason, on the other hand, still sneered whenever he saw her, but Lucy was learning to let his words slide off her shoulders. After the history presentation, where she had managed to speak without stumbling, Lucy noticed something shift within herself. She didn't feel as invisible or as scared anymore. One afternoon, Ms. Daniels announced an upcoming art competition. The theme was Dreams and Hopes, and students were encouraged to create something that reflected what they aspired to or how they viewed the future. Lucy's heart thudded when she heard the announcement. Back when her life had been different, before the streets, before the loneliness, she used to draw on anything she could find. Sketches of flowers, birds, even just patterns that made her feel calm. But she hadn't drawn in years. The idea both excited and terrified her. After class, Emily turned to her, eyes bright with enthusiasm. "You should totally enter, Lucy. You're always doodling in your notebook. I bet you're good." Lucy shrugged, not wanting to reveal how rusty she felt. That evening, back at the hotel, Thomas noticed her quiet mood. As they ate dinner, a simple meal of sandwiches and soup, he gently prodded, "Something on your mind?" Lucy hesitated, unsure whether to share her thoughts. Eventually, she pulled out her notebook, showing him a page where she had drawn a small, intricate sketch of a dandelion being blown by the wind. Thomas smiled, genuinely impressed. "You drew this?" Lucy nodded, fiddling with the edge of the page. "There's this art competition at school. I thought about entering, but I don't know." Thomas leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "What's holding you back?" Lucy bit her lip. "What if it's not good enough? What if people laugh at it?" Thomas looked at her, his expression gentle but firm. "You know, art isn't about being perfect. It's about expressing something inside you. If it matters to you, that's what makes it important. Besides, you'll never know how good it is unless you give it a shot." Lucy considered his words, feeling a flicker of determination. Maybe she could try, just once, to put herself out there. The next day, during lunch, Emily excitedly told the group about her idea for the competition. A mural of hands reaching for the sky, representing different dreams. Olivia planned to create a collage of famous women who had broken barriers, while Max was thinking of making a model airplane since he dreamed of becoming a pilot. When they asked Lucy about her idea, she hesitated before saying, "Maybe, something about finding a place to belong." Emily's face softened with understanding, and Olivia gave an encouraging nod. "That sounds beautiful," she said. Over the next few days, Lucy found herself sketching late into the night, using the small desk lamp as her guide. She settled on drawing a tree growing in a cracked sidewalk, its roots pushing through the concrete. Around the tree were tiny figures, some walking past without noticing, others stopping to marvel at how something so beautiful could come from a broken place. She poured her heart into every line, shading the roots to make them look sturdy despite their surroundings. When Thomas saw her progress, he didn't say much, just gave her a proud smile that made Lucy's chest feel warm. As the competition day approached, Lucy couldn't help but feel nervous. She saw some of the other students' projects displayed in the hallway, vibrant paintings, thoughtful sculptures, and even a digital animation created by one of the older students. Mason walked by, giving Lucy's drawing a dismissive glance. "You think that's gonna win?" Looks like something a little kid would make. Lucy didn't respond, just kept her focus on adding the final touches to her piece. She tried not to let his words sink in, reminding herself that Thomas had said it was about expressing what mattered to her. The night before the competition, Lucy barely slept. She kept picturing everyone staring at her drawing, whispering about how plain or silly it looked. But when morning came, she took a deep breath and decided she wouldn't back down. Thomas walked her to the bus stop, giving her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. No matter what happens, you did something brave. That's what counts. During the competition, the gymnasium was filled with parents, teachers, and students, all wandering between the displays. Lucy tried to stay near Emily's project, pretending to be fascinated by it even though her own nerves were on edge. When the judges reached her piece, she couldn't hear what they were saying, but she noticed Ms. Daniels smiling at her from across the room. Emily squeezed her arm in encouragement. After what felt like hours, the principal took the microphone to announce the winners. Olivia won third place for her collage, and Max's model earned him second place. Lucy's heart raced as the principal continued. And first place goes to Lucy Adams for her drawing titled Roots of Hope. Lucy froze, not sure she had heard correctly. Olivia whooped, and Emily practically dragged her to the front. As the principal handed her the ribbon, Lucy's hands shook. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the gym on her, but instead of fear, she felt an odd sense of lightness. People weren't laughing, they were clapping. She glanced at Thomas, who gave her a thumbs up, his eyes bright with pride. Afterward, Emily and Olivia bombarded her with praise, and even Max, who was usually quiet, patted her shoulder and said, "That was really cool." Lucy couldn't stop smiling. Mason walked by, muttering something about it being pure luck, but his words didn't touch her this time. She had done something she was proud of, and for once she didn't care what he thought. Back at the hotel that night, Lucy hung the ribbon on the wall next to her bed. Thomas made her favorite mac and cheese to celebrate, and they watched an old comedy movie on TV, laughing at the ridiculous jokes. Lucy couldn't stop glancing at the ribbon, half expecting it to disappear. But it stayed, solid and real, reminding her that sometimes good things did happen when she took a chance. That night, as Lucy wrote in her notebook, she felt something new, a spark of confidence that hadn't been there before. Maybe it wasn't just luck. Maybe she really did have something to offer. As she drifted off to sleep, she let herself believe that finding a place to belong wasn't just a distant dream. Maybe it was something she was already building, one brave step at a time. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. The days after the art competition felt like a dream to Lucy. Winning first place had given her a sense of pride she had never known before. At school, people who had barely noticed her before were now saying hello in the hallways. Even some teachers complimented her drawing, telling her how much they loved the idea of a tree growing through the cracks, symbolizing resilience. Emily and Olivia made sure everyone knew that Lucy was the one who had put her heart into that piece. For the first time, Lucy didn't feel like she had to shrink into the background. Instead, she walked a little taller, still cautious but undeniably more confident. Thomas noticed the change too. One evening as they shared dinner, he said with a chuckle, "You know, I might have to start calling you the artist of Fairmont." Lucy blushed but couldn't hide her smile. However, not everyone was thrilled by Lucy's newfound recognition. Mason seemed more irritated than ever. During a group assignment in English class, he muttered to his friend Noah that Lucy's win was just dumb luck, that anyone could draw a tree. Lucy heard but pretended not to. She reminded herself of what Thomas had said, that some people criticize because they can't handle seeing others succeed. It still stung, though, to know that someone actively disliked her just for being noticed. One rainy afternoon, as Lucy packed her things to leave school, Emily ran up to her, breathless and excited. "You have to come see this," she exclaimed, grabbing Lucy's arm. Confused but curious, Lucy followed her to the art room, where Ms. Daniels was talking to another teacher. On the back wall, there was a display of all the competition entries, and right in the center, framed and highlighted, was Lucy's drawing. Above it, a sign read, "Dreams and Hopes, first place Lucy Adams." Lucy stared stunned. Ms. Daniels noticed them and smiled warmly. "We thought it deserved a special spot," she explained. "It's inspiring, Lucy. You did something beautiful." Later, as Lucy walked home with Emily, they talked about everything but the art display, as if avoiding the topic would keep it from feeling too overwhelming. Emily asked about Lucy's favorite books, and Lucy admitted she hadn't read much lately. Emily immediately promised to lend her a few from her own collection. As they approached the bus stop, Lucy couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to understand what friendship felt like. That night, Thomas surprised her with a small sketchbook. "I figured you might want something a bit more official for your next masterpiece," he teased. Lucy took it gently, tracing the textured cover with her fingers. "Thank you," she whispered, overwhelmed by how thoughtful he was. They sat together, Lucy sketching random ideas while Thomas talked about his day. It was peaceful, something Lucy still wasn't used to, but she liked it. A few days later, Ms. Daniels approached Lucy after class and handed her a letter. "This came in for you," she said, her tone curious. Lucy unfolded the paper and read the neat, typed message. It was from the Seattle Youth Art Program, congratulating her on her recent win at the school competition. They were inviting her to participate in a weekend art workshop for young talents, hosted at the Seattle Art Museum. Lucy couldn't believe it. She had never been to an art workshop before, never even imagined herself in one. Ms. Daniels must have noticed her shock. "It's a great opportunity," she said encouragingly. "You should go." When Lucy showed the letter to Thomas that evening, he beamed. "That's amazing. You have to go. It'll be good for you to meet other young artists." Lucy wasn't so sure. The idea of being surrounded by strangers, all probably better than her, made her stomach twist. But Thomas wouldn't let her doubt herself. "If you're nervous, I'll go with you. We'll make a day of it. How about that?" Lucy hesitated, but his enthusiasm was contagious. She agreed, and Thomas made the arrangements, reassuring her every step of the way. The day of the workshop arrived, and Lucy couldn't stop fidgeting. The museum was bigger than she'd imagined, its glass and steel structure reflecting the cloudy sky. Inside, the lobby buzzed with activity, kids her age clutching portfolios, chatting with parents and mentors. Lucy felt out of place again, like a small dot in a giant painting. Thomas squeezed her shoulder reassuringly before she headed into the workshop room. Inside, the instructor, a tall woman with colorful scarves and a wide smile, welcomed everyone. She talked about creativity and how art could come from pain, joy, or simple curiosity. Lucy glanced around, noticing how confident everyone seemed. When they were given the task to draw something that represented a significant moment in their lives, Lucy froze. What could she possibly draw that wouldn't reveal too much? She thought of the tree from her previous piece, but that felt repetitive. Then an idea struck her. She began sketching a small figure standing at a bus stop, rain pouring down around them. In the distance, a hotel sign glowed faintly. The figure looked small but determined, holding a broken umbrella against the storm. As Lucy worked, the noise around her faded. She poured everything into the drawing, how it felt to stand alone in the world, unsure of the next step but refusing to give up. When the session ended, the instructor walked around, offering feedback. She paused at Lucy's sketch, her face thoughtful. "That's powerful," she said. "It feels honest." Lucy wasn't sure what to say, just nodded and muttered a quiet thank you. As the workshop wrapped up, one of the other participants, a boy named Ethan, complimented her work. "That's really cool. It's like you can feel the rain just by looking at it." Lucy couldn't help but smile. Maybe she wasn't as out of place as she thought. When Lucy reunited with Thomas, he asked how it went. For once, Lucy didn't downplay it. "It was good. I didn't mess up," she said, almost surprised at herself. Thomas grinned. "I knew you'd be great." They stopped for ice cream on the way back, and Lucy felt something growing inside her, a confidence she never knew she could have. That night, as she sketched in her new book, she couldn't help but think about how far she had come in just a few months. The girl who once avoided eye contact now had friends, a place at school, and even a small community of artists who respected her work. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, people like Mason, doubts creeping in during quiet moments, but for the first time, Lucy believed she could face them. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was starting to live. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. The weeks after the art workshop passed in a blur, and Lucy found herself more engaged at school than ever before. Ms. Daniels encouraged her to continue drawing, sometimes letting her stay in the art room during lunch to experiment with new techniques. Emily and Olivia remained by her side, always curious about what she was working on, while Max would occasionally drop by to offer his opinion, usually in the form of a casual thumbs up or a quiet, "That looks pretty cool." Even though Mason still threw the occasional rude comment her way, Lucy had learned to shrug it off. It didn't hurt as much anymore, especially now that she knew not everyone thought the same way. One day after school, Thomas greeted Lucy with a piece of paper in his hand, a hint of excitement in his eyes. "Guess what?" he began, holding it up. Lucy took it from him, reading the bold letters at the top. "Seattle Youth Art Showcase. Call for submissions." They were looking for young artists to display their work at a community event downtown. "This could be your next big thing," Thomas said with a smile. Lucy's mind raced. The thought of putting her work on public display again made her stomach twist, but a small part of her wanted to try. She had proven to herself once that she could take a risk. Maybe it was time to do it again. That night, Lucy lay in bed thinking about what she could create. The workshop drawing had been personal, and it felt strange to expose her feelings like that again. But then she remembered the sense of connection when the instructor complimented her honesty. Maybe that was the point, showing what was real even if it wasn't perfect. Over the next few days, Lucy sketched ideas in her notebook. She thought about the contrast between her old life on the streets and her new one with Thomas. One evening, while sitting by the window and watching the city lights, inspiration struck. She started drawing a cityscape split in half, one side showing bustling streets, people rushing past without noticing the small figure sitting against a wall, the other side showing a cozy room filled with light and a sense of safety. The two worlds met in the middle, blending together like a dream overlapping with reality. At school, Emily asked her what she was working on, and Lucy hesitated before showing the rough sketch. Emily's face softened and she whispered, "That's beautiful. It's like showing how your life changed." Olivia, who overheard, nodded in agreement. "It's honest," she said simply. Lucy couldn't help but feel grateful for their support. It was strange to have people in her life who actually cared about what she did. After completing the piece, Lucy brought it to school to show Ms. Daniels, who studied it with careful eyes. "You've captured something really profound here," she said. "I think it's perfect for the showcase." Lucy's heart thudded with nervous excitement. She knew that putting her work out there again would be scary, but the thought of her art being seen by more people filled her with a sense of purpose. At home, Thomas helped her prepare the submission, carefully packaging the drawing with a small note explaining its meaning. "No matter what happens, I'm proud of you for putting yourself out there," he said. The showcase was scheduled for a Saturday at the Seattle Center. On the day of the event, Lucy wore her best dress, a simple blue one that Thomas had gotten her after the art competition. As they arrived, Lucy saw dozens of displays already set up: paintings, sculptures, digital art. The room buzzed with excitement. Thomas gave her an encouraging nod as they found her designated space. Setting up her drawing, Lucy couldn't help but feel small among the more extravagant pieces. Still, she took a deep breath and reminded herself that her art had a story to tell, just like everyone else's. As the showcase opened to the public, people began moving through the exhibits, pausing to appreciate the work. Lucy watched from a distance, too anxious to stand right by her drawing. She saw a group of teenagers stop in front of it, one of them pointing at the split cityscape and murmuring something to her friends. A few adults approached next, one of them even taking a photo. Lucy felt her cheeks heat up, unsure whether to be proud or nervous. Suddenly, she spotted a familiar face among the crowd. Ms. Daniels had come to support her. When she saw Lucy, she waved and walked over. "You did it," she said proudly. "It looks amazing displayed like this." They stood together for a while watching people's reactions. At one point, a middle-aged man, likely an art critic judging by his notebook, studied Lucy's piece for a long moment before scribbling something down. The highlight of the evening came when one of the organizers announced that they would be giving special mentions to a few pieces that embodied the spirit of the showcase. Lucy didn't expect anything, just happy to see her work displayed at all. When the name Lucy Adams was called, she froze. The organizer praised her piece for its raw honesty and depiction of the struggle to find safety and belonging. Thomas clapped loudly, his pride evident, and Miss Daniels gave her a hug. Lucy made her way to the front, where the organizer handed her a small certificate and complimented her on her artistic voice. Later, as the event wound down, a woman approached Lucy, introducing herself as a local artist who often hosted workshops for young creatives. She complimented Lucy's piece and invited her to join a weekly art group, where she could continue developing her skills. Lucy was speechless but managed to thank her, overwhelmed by the support and encouragement. That night, back at the hotel, Thomas hung the certificate on the wall next to the ribbon from the school competition. They ordered takeout to celebrate, and Lucy couldn't stop smiling, replaying the evening in her mind. For so long she had thought of herself as just the girl who didn't belong anywhere. Now it seemed like her world was opening up in ways she had never imagined. She still had doubts and insecurities, but the feeling of being seen and appreciated was slowly replacing her fear. As she sketched in her new notebook later that night, Lucy thought about what the woman at the showcase had said about developing her skills. Maybe this was just the beginning. The idea of joining a real art group both thrilled and terrified her, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to let fear hold her back anymore. She had taken small steps before, but now it was time to take bigger ones. Whatever came next, she knew she would face it with the same determination that had gotten her this far. Before going to next, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends. Months had passed since that unforgettable night at the Seattle Youth Art Showcase, and Lucy's life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The weeks following the event were filled with growth, challenges, and unexpected opportunities. Thomas's support had never wavered, and with Ms. Daniels guiding her every step of the way, Lucy became more confident in her abilities as an artist. She attended the art group that the woman from the showcase had invited her to, and soon she found herself surrounded by people who shared her passion and encouraged her creativity. They became a second family, offering feedback, advice, and friendship. Lucy felt like she was finally where she was supposed to be. But the road hadn't been without its bumps. After the showcase, Mason still tried to make life difficult for her at school. He would make snide comments about her success, claiming that it was all a fluke or that her art was too simple. At first, Lucy felt hurt, but she had learned to brush it off. His words no longer held the same weight they once did. She had found something far more valuable: her own self-worth. One afternoon, as Lucy worked on a new painting at the art group, she received an unexpected call from her old friend Olivia. She hadn't seen Olivia in months, but they had stayed in touch through social media. Olivia's voice was full of excitement as she told Lucy about an upcoming opportunity. "There's this local art contest and I think you should enter," Olivia said. "It's big, Lucy. You could win a scholarship or even get noticed by a gallery." Lucy's heart skipped a beat. She had never considered entering something that prestigious. But Olivia's words sparked something inside her, a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Could she really do this? After all, she was still the girl who had once lived on the streets, struggling to survive. How could she possibly compete with artists who had years of formal training? But she had learned that her strength didn't come from the fancy techniques she had mastered. It came from her ability to express what was real and raw in her heart. With Thomas's encouragement and the support of her art group, Lucy decided to give it a shot. She poured herself into her work, spending hours at the canvas, painting a piece that reflected her journey. This time, instead of splitting her worlds into two separate halves, she painted one that blended them together. The cityscape from before remained, but this time it wasn't divided. Instead, Lucy painted herself standing at the center, her arms outstretched as if embracing both parts of her life, the pain of the past and the promise of the future. When she submitted her painting, she felt a sense of accomplishment, regardless of the outcome. She had taken another step forward, and that was what mattered. Weeks later, she received an email notifying her that she had been selected as one of the finalists. Her hands shook as she read the words over and over again, struggling to believe what she was seeing. The competition was tough, with artists from all over the city submitting their work, but Lucy's painting had stood out. She was invited to present it at an exhibit downtown, and the prize, a scholarship to an art school, was within reach. On the day of the exhibition, Lucy stood in front of her painting, her heart racing. People milled around the gallery, admiring the different pieces. She had never imagined being in a place like this, surrounded by artists and art lovers, yet here she was, her work displayed on the wall. As visitors approached her painting, Lucy listened to their reactions. Some remarked on the intricate details, while others commented on the emotion they could feel radiating from the canvas. For the first time, Lucy understood what it meant to truly connect with her audience. By the end of the evening, the winners were announced and Lucy's name was called. The room erupted in applause as she walked up to receive her award, a full scholarship to a prestigious art school in California. Tears filled her eyes as she clutched the certificate in her hands. She had done it. She had gone from a girl living on the streets to a recognized artist with a future full of possibilities. As she looked around the room, she caught sight of Thomas, standing in the back with a proud smile on his face. His support had been unwavering from the very beginning, and now it had brought her to this moment. He had been the one who saw her potential when no one else did. He had been the one who believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. Later that night, after the exhibition had wrapped up, Thomas and Lucy sat outside the gallery, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. The air was crisp and the excitement of the evening still hung in the air. "You did it," Thomas said softly, his voice filled with pride. "I knew you could." Lucy smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. "You were there when I needed someone the most. You helped me see that I'm worth more than I ever thought I was." Thomas reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. And you've only just begun. This is just the start of something incredible. As they sat there, the sound of distant laughter and music filled the air, but Lucy didn't hear any of it. All she could focus on was the realization that her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. She had gone from being a lost and broken girl to an artist with a future ahead of her. She had learned that no matter how hard life got, no matter how broken she felt, there was always hope, always a chance for redemption. And as she looked ahead, Lucy knew she was ready for whatever came next. If you've liked this story, please subscribe to our channel, like and share with friends.